How's it, everybody? Welcome to Exponential Africa Live, a weekly live show that focuses on bringing the best thought leadership, technology and innovation to the African continent and the world. Over the weekend, South African-born Elon Musk inspired the world when his company SpaceX launched their rocket, carrying 2 NASA astronauts to the space station, proving the impossible is possible. This is our 3rd week of the show, and the most inspiring thing for the team and I are the amazing comments, questions, emails, donations, and feedback we've gotten from all of you. Thank you for stepping into the arena and engaging with us, as Theodore Roosevelt would say. We need courage like this to push this conversation further. So far, we've raised over 5,000 Rand for students at Maharishi to supply them with data for remote learning. So thank you, and keep donating. Here's some food for thought. Us humans are creatures of habit, and it's really hard to break our habits and behaviors. But we're going to have to if we want to eradicate hunger and feed everyone with a growing global population. On the other side of the scale, obesity is at an all-time high, and according to the WHO, in 2016, there were 1.9 billion overweight people and 600 million obese people. And that's only gotten bigger. The current food supply won't be able to sustain itself from manufacturing to distribution, and we need new solutions. So tonight is all about thinking of food in new ways, and we have some of the world's leading experts and entrepreneurs that are doing just that. And they align perfectly with our mission as Singularity Youth South Africa and Man-Made, which is to help #future-proof Africa by building a global community of change makers who can actually solve some of Africa's and the world's greatest challenges and be future leaders. We do this through various educational experiences that educate, empower, and inspire, and by building our community and network. We are inspired by the concept of getting a fresh start in the food industry and building new business models for food delivery. Even rock stars like Justin Bieber are getting behind this and saying that you can't live on an empty stomach. We need to solve this hunger crisis for the entire world, as well as the obesity crisis. And I believe that with exponential technologies and a great mindset, it's possible. Everyone has the power to impact their own society and circle of influence and pay it forward. We need to come together to forge a new direction and use the opportunity to reimagine how we do things. And we know it's not going to be easy, but it will be worth it. What are you going to do that can make a positive difference in your own community or neighborhood or family? Tonight we'll be covering some of the latest tech stories, a few of the proudly South African Feeding the Poor initiatives, and then we will have a discussion with our illustrious panel on how we can design the food of the future. We are really lucky to have our guests for this evening. We have Arturo Elizondo, who's the founder and CEO of Clara Foods, a biotech food company based in Silicon Valley, making real animal protein without the use of a single animal, starting with the world's first animal-free egg whites. We also have Andile Ngcobo, a farmer, consultant, agribusiness strategist who's climbing the agriculture ladder, a large-scale commercial farm manager managing the operations of Tusokuhle Farming, and he's doing incredible things in the world of hydroponic technology. And finally, we have Marc Post. Marc is a professor of psychology at the Maastricht University, as well as the co-founder of Mosa Meat, a company that is set to commercialize cultured meat in the near future. He's also the Singularity U Netherlands faculty on the future of food. A special mention goes out to our partners, who this would not be possible without. Our collaboration partner, the Development Bank of Southern Africa, our global partner Deloitte, and our strategic partner MTN. We really appreciate all the people who work at these organizations for their commitment and dedication to making a positive impact in South Africa and Africa. Lastly, if you want to see more of these weekly episodes, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube page, or register on the website to get more info and be eligible for giveaways. All right, let's jump right into it. Lockdown has shown us the South African spirit of Ubuntu, and we've seen an incredible showing of unity with so many people coming together. We want to highlight some of the amazing causes that are doing their very best to ensure that as many South Africans have full bellies during this time. With Stronger Together, for R3212, you can win SA World Cup rugby team mementos from the World Cup, including the South African flag that Faf de Klerk was wearing when he nearly broke the internet with this picture. All proceeds go to Food Forward SA and Gift of the Givers. The One People Fund has the Maize for a Month initiative. They've fed over 201,000 people in 3 days and procured over 1,000 tons of maize for those who need it the most. Check them out at onepeoplefund.com. Another incredible initiative is Food Forward SA, where Food Forward SA uses their digital food banking app to ensure that unused produce can be moved to where it's needed the most, rather than letting anything go to the bins. And they've raised over 43 million rand in aid for the needy. The Melrose North Community Action Network has had an overwhelming amount of support and generosity. They're providing lunch for 150 kids per day in Kliptown and month-long food parcels for families. Over the past 5 weeks, 386 family packs have been provided and 30,000 meals have been sent with love from Melrose North to the people of Kliptown. Absolutely inspiring what Melrose North can do. The Do More Foundation has set an impressive goal of providing 10 million meals to vulnerable children and their families during the COVID-19 pandemic. To date, they've provided over 2 million meals and they're still going strong. Their dedication to upliftment extends to the COVID-19 information they are supplying with the meals they distribute. This means that the communities are also better equipped to keep themselves safe. The Do More Foundation is a registered non-profit organization that was founded by the RCL Foods Group. Something close to our heart, iconic South African citizen Solly Croc has committed to raising a staggering 108 million rand from international and local communities. Solly plans to do this by walking his age in kilometers, so that's 91 kilometers, even though he's never walked a day most of his life or done any exercise. All in the name of raising money to fund hunger and food security, which is further threatened by COVID-19. I'm honored to say that we have partnered with Solly and a whole bunch of other amazing organizations on this initiative, as you can see on the screen. And I wanted to just say that I wish that when I reach 91, that I have as much energy and desire to positively change the world as Solly does. And that just proves that age is just a number, and that we can keep making an impact in this world, no matter what age we are. So make sure to donate to keep the wolf from the door. That's all we have time for this segment. Thank you to all these amazing South Africans for stepping into the arena and making a positive difference. There really are so many ways you can play your part. It's truly inspiring. Now it's time to catch up on the tech news to see what awesome breakthroughs have been made globally and locally. Taste testers used to have beef with lab-grown meat, but that dissatisfaction no longer exists. That's because Mosa Meat has made a breakthrough in the texture. They seeded and grew 3 cell types that give the end product more meat-like texture properties. This will help scale up the production of different types of cultured meats and provide protein sources beyond animal agriculture. And we're going to hear from Marc, their founder, a bit later. South African leading food manufacturer RCL Foods invests in global plant-based food company. The visionary RCL Foods team was part of the founders round of the $200 million fundraise in the Live Kindly Co., which is committed to transforming the global food system within the alternate food protein sector. The Live Kindly Co. owns 100% of the South African-born global company Fry's Family Food Co., which makes meatless burgers, chicken and seafood for retail and food service. They have also acquired Like Meat in Europe, which is a world-class plant-based chicken range. The EU will plant 3 billion trees by 2030. The EU has taken the lead with science as their special power to work out exactly how many trees they need to plant in order to preserve biodiversity on the continent. That number has them committed to planting a whopping 3 billion trees by 2030. It's the first continent-wide and all-of-government strategy ever. Proudly SA company is democratizing produce sales. Hello Choice is an online produce trading platform that directly connects farmers and buyers. It has successfully built a thriving trading community of buyers and sellers and addresses broader food security and socio-economic needs. They're protecting value and removing unnecessary or hidden costs in the supply chain, and this is really exciting coming from a South African company. Daily Bread gets an upgrade, and Albany Bread has come up with a new tamper-proof laser seal technology to ensure your bread is sealed and fresh from package to delivery. That is newly more relevant, especially under COVID. Naspers plows 100 million rand into SA agri-tech business. Aerobotics has just received an incredible investment from Naspers. Aerobotics is a subscription-based AI company that provides tools for crop management. The platform uses AI, drones, and software to help farmers manage crop health and predict crop yields. The eye really is in the detail because this tech gives farmers information about individual pieces of fruit on a tree, which is unbelievable, giving them a power that they never had before. Time for our Africa Innovation Spotlight. The drive to find alternatives that place less strain on the environment is in full throttle. Before lockdown, I happened to be in Israel and managed to pick up some creepy crawly locusts from this company, Hagel. It's pretty amazing that they make these locusts that give you a real big dosage of protein. And the one thing I prefer more than discussing food is eating it. So I've got some of these locusts right here, and I'm going to try them for the first time right in front of you right now. So let's try these guys out. These are a locust, as you can see there, and just ate it. And it tastes a bit like chicken, I must say. A bit dry. Yeah. I think they will have to just work on the flavor a bit, but it's pretty exciting. And this leads us to our African innovation story, which is going to have you buzzing. It's now a global practice to find alternative forms of milk derivatives. On the South African shores, we have our very own entrepreneurs who are the producers of Ento milk. With a little help from the insect world, Ento milk is a dairy alternative that is made from the larva of black soldier flies. Cape Town-based company Gourmet Grub is responsible for creating and experimenting with this product. The team is passionate about providing sustainable food sources that are rich in protein, fat, calcium, iron, and zinc. Their vision is to make nutritious food accessible to all. The company uses the Ento milk to create ice cream and other foods that are as wholesome as possible and apparently as delicious too. And I've tried their ice cream, it really is delicious. As humanity's population increases in size, many believe that more sustainable solutions should be considered into the insects. These may just be one of the keys to feeding our growing world. Insects take up less space than other milk sources, and they don't damage the environment or produce greenhouse gases. Well, if that doesn't get you interested in trying something a little different, then I'm not sure what will. And if anyone wants to try those locusts, just let me know. In our Help Educate section of the show, we are trying to appeal to you to give back. And we are so grateful to the ones that have helped fund almost 1,000 Maharishi students with some data. Over the last 2 shows, we have raised 5,000 Rand, and we are hoping to raise this number to 20,000 Rand soon. You can scan the QR code on your screen and make a donation. All the proceeds from tonight's donations will go to helping educate students in South Africa. Maharishi Institute has switched almost 1,000 of these students to online classes for their degrees since the lockdown and are phasing back their approach of bringing students back to school. So they really do need this financial assistance at this time. So the QR code is on your screen, and please make sure to donate if you can. And as these students fall more and more behind, they risk not being able to catch up the opportunity of graduating and getting employment into a quality job. So please, I will again just once more say, please donate if you can. And now we're going to move on to the next section of the show, our main panel discussion. Hi everybody, it's time to move on to the main discussion of the show. Tonight's panel of designing the food of the future. Tonight we have Arturo Elizondo, Andile Ngcobo, and Marc Post. Arturo is the founder and CEO of Clara Foods, a biotech company based in Silicon Valley, making real animal protein without the use of a single animal protein, starting with the world's first animal-free egg white. Clara uses wheat fermentation similar to beer and winemaking to make proteins that have the same taste and nutrition of other animal proteins. Arturo has been named the National Hispanic Institute's Person of the Year and featured on Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Andile Ngcobo is our second panelist for this evening. Andile Ngcobo is a 25-year-old farmer who is passionate about sustainable agriculture, consulting, and agribusiness strategy. Andile is doing incredible things in hydroponics and aquaponics technology, using tools that are available to him. Our third panelist is Mr. Marc Post. Marc Post is a professor of psychology at the Maastricht University and co-founder of Mosa Meat, a company that is set to commercialize cultured meat in the near future. He is also the co-founder of Quorum, which uses a similar technology to make cow leather. Marc presented the world's first hamburger cultured from muscle stem cells in 2013 and laid the foundation for a budding new industry. As a faculty member of Singularity University, he is a thought leader and speaker on transforming technologies in agriculture. Let's welcome on our first guest for this evening. Arturo, how are you doing?
Hi, Mick. Doing really well. Thanks for having me. It's an early day here in Silicon Valley.
Thanks for joining us this early in the morning over in Silicon Valley. Arturo, you've had an amazing career, and do you want to tell us how you got into this world of making animal-free eggs?
Yes, definitely a little bit of an unconventional path. By heritage, I'm Mexican and I'm Texan. And so I grew up eating 2 eggs for breakfast every morning, grew up eating, having barbecue almost every single Sunday. And animal protein was such a huge part of my upbringing. And it wasn't until I spent some time in government. I studied government at Harvard and then decided to spend quite a bit of time in government trying to understand how the food system works. And I spent some time at the U.S. Department of Agriculture in the sub-agency that regulates and oversees all the slaughterhouses in the country. And it just blew my mind how massive the animal protein production complex really was. I never questioned where my food came from. I just ate it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but never really thought about the process and all it took to get that food to my plate. And when I learned that in the U.S. alone, we slaughtered over 1 million animals every single hour to feed less than 5% of the global population, it was mind-boggling. And I then decided to spend some time in Geneva studying global food security and began seeing the trend globally. In particular, how it's not just the U.S., but across the world, especially in developing countries, the first thing people do when they enter the middle class is they buy animal protein. And then understanding how much water and land and energy it took to produce all that protein was shocking. I had no idea that animal agriculture emitted more greenhouse gases than the entire transportation sector globally, than all the cars, ships, planes, boats in the world combined. That we use over 1/3 of the world's freshwater for animal agriculture and 1/3 of the world's arable land. And as demand continues to rise, there's going to be more and more strain on these resources. And there literally is not enough land or water on the planet to satiate that kind of demand, especially going into 2050. And so I knew that there had to be a way of making food more sustainably. But the key for me was, how do you make it delicious? How do you get the same texture and functionality and taste that people have grown to love and expect from their foods? Because ultimately, in order to drive global change, we have to be able to meet people where they're at. And that's why I started Clara Foods, because we can leverage biotechnology to make protein that has a taste and the functionality that people have come to expect from their breakfast omelets, from their baked goods, from in their barbecues, and without having to produce it using animals. And so our process allows us to have distributed fermentation, where we can literally brew our protein in every country on earth, especially those where you can't grow animals. And as these countries get affected by climate change, by these pandemics, is that it's going to be more and more important to have a reliable food supply. And that's where companies like us can really bridge that gap.
No, I think it's such an exciting space, and it's incredible what you're doing. And just to have that moment when you get inspired to take on such a mammoth project like you have, it's really amazing. And you've been going for the last couple of years, right? And you've raised about $50 million so far. When you raise that type of money and you're creating a new product or new invention that doesn't exist, what's your first step?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've raised over $50 million, and we've been in R&D for the last 5.5 years. So we've been pretty under the radar, really working on developing this technology. Ultimately, for me, the most important piece is, how do we make this accessible to everyone? And so we've invested a lot in R&D to continue to go down the cost curve, so that this can be accessible to people all over the world, not just in San Francisco or Silicon Valley or New York, but everywhere. And so in the last 5.5 years, we've really spent a lot of our resources building out an R&D infrastructure and starting to manufacture products. So we actually are ramping up manufacturing and are launching 2 of our first products this year, which is very, very exciting. And we've begun shipping 1 already.
Wow, that's really incredible. Thanks so much for that. We're going to come back to you in a bit. Our next guest for this evening is Andile Ngcobo. Andile, how are you doing?
How's it, Mick? Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on the show. You've been doing some amazing things on the ground here in South Africa. Do you want to tell us about some of your initiatives and some of the new technologies that you're looking at using that are available?
All right, so I obviously come from South Africa, in quite a big province of KwaZulu-Natal, where food security based on the large population can be a bit of an issue, especially in the sense of trying to make food security more of a personal issue, as opposed to looking at it as a governmental issue as such. So at Tusokuhle Farming, we have been trying our best to innovate and use innovative technology to obviously try and see if we could reduce the turnover time and growing period of vegetables, as they do form quite a large part of the staple food in KZN, KwaZulu-Natal more specifically. As much as we do consume a lot of grains and starch, but our vegetables are highly more affordable than our meat or protein or meat products. So, we've been supplying our local community. And as we had been developing, we've tried out many types of farming operations, such as our greenhouses to start off with. Obviously, that was for us using fertigation and drip irrigation as a more efficient way of using water to grow vegetables as opposed to open land. But of course, we also figured out that that's not the most affordable and the cheapest form of farming that can be made available to a lot of our rural communities. So we've then gone on to embarking on the journey of trying out hydroponics. And we are, again, trying to use as much as we have available to us to efficiently produce vegetables and turnaround time of supply.
No, awesome. Thanks so much for that. I think it's a really exciting space, just being able to grow in a new way. Our next guest we're going to move on to is Mr. Marc Post. Marc, thanks for being on the show.
Hi, Mick. Thanks for having me.
And Marc, you've got this incredible accolade of having created the first $300,000 cultured meat burger, which you did in 2013. You've had an incredible development and growth since then. What's been happening in the last couple of years, and when can we see your products coming to the shelves?
The journalist questions, yes. Just like Arturo said, we spent a lot of time in R&D further developing and improving the product. And of course, this was not really a product because it was €250,000 or $300,000 for a hamburger, which was ridiculous. And it also shows, I think, one of the things that Arturo also touched upon is that you have to find a way to make these technologies that in our case are really coming from the medical field to make them cost effective. And that requires, it's doable, but it requires a lot of research and development. So that we have spending the last couple of years on those particular issues, also just improving the product, adding fat tissue to it, adding fibrous tissue to it. And yes, we in 2016 we started the company Mosa Meat, and that it really aims to commercialize and scale up production. So we are currently in the fundraising to get our first pilot plant up and running. So the technology is pretty much established, still on the expensive side, but it will enable us to start pilot plant production and to the market. High end, still high price and kind of low scale will probably be in the next 2.5-3 years, 2 to 3 years. Low price, maybe in that time, but likely it's going to be a little bit longer than that.
And just, do you want to explain to the audience what is cultured meat? How do you actually make the meat?
Yeah, well, it's meat as you know it. It's just made and it's made from the same cells, but not in a cow. We take the cells from the cow, let them grow tremendously, and let them produce meat, which they kind of do by themselves. So it's essentially the same tissue, except that the cells are growing outside of the cow instead of inside of the cow. And the reason why we're doing that is, well, actually, Arturo mentioned all the reasons. Meat is a highly valued part of our food supply. We love it. And it's quite honestly, it's quite nutritious. It has a lot of good qualities to it. But it's also very resource intense. And Arturo mentioned those. So very resource intense. And that's because these animals are not necessarily very efficient in making that meat. And that's where this technology comes in, where we basically use the cells to do essentially the same, but in a much more efficient way.
So interesting, eh? Wow. Thanks so much for that. We're going to move into the main section of the panel. Guys, as you saw a bit earlier, there's been some incredible cases of unity in Ubuntu, where initiatives have been started to try solve some of this hunger crisis that's been created by COVID-19. What are some of the examples that you guys have seen globally in your own areas, and any practical tips you can give people? Let's start with you, Arturo.
You know, what I've seen that has really inspired me specifically has been, especially for in places like New York City, where there are young people going out to the grocery stores on behalf of the elderly who can't leave their home for risk of contracting COVID. As you know, New York City has been one of the hotspots of the epicenter of the COVID epidemic here in the U.S. And I've been really inspired by the level of solidarity of the level of solidarity across people. And you know, I think the sad part is that, you know, I think to a large degree our food system is still requires so much human interaction, and I think what's exciting is seeing all of these supermarkets and stores being able to actually do contactless delivery. You know, how to leverage technology to not have to put people into harm's way. And so there are grocery stores like I think like Target or other stores like Best Buy that end up being able to deliver products, whether food or otherwise, to consumers without there being any human interaction, which I think has been really exciting for me to see how technology can be used as a great force for good during these times.
Yeah, I think you know, it's interesting that COVID has kind of influenced countries in different ways. So there's a huge difference, not only in the amount of infections and the number of deaths, but also in economic consequences and all sorts of other consequences. And I may be a little bit biased, but my sense is that countries where the government is a strong influence and is sufficiently kind of accepted in the population actually has a huge impact on how you can deal with externalities like these. So it strikes me that countries with kind of weak governments and weak governmental institutions have much more trouble coping with this than countries which have strong governments. The other thing that strikes me really is that, and this is kind of on the negative side, I guess, is that every country seems to do this on its own without looking across the border. I mean, the Netherlands is a good example. We are a huge exporter of agricultural goods. So this could have been an opportunity to ramp that and to start helping a lot of other countries in getting through this crisis. But I have not seen such a thing. So not kind of cross-national solidarity and development of plans to distribute its huge agricultural wealth to other countries.
That's quite an interesting take on it. I think we need to get in touch with the global multinational food companies and get them to spread the love. Andile, how can we help alleviate this current crisis?
Well, I mean, the culture of NGOs coming together to supply food parcels in South Africa has been a long-standing culture. In fact, we've had issues where we've had to come together to assist people who were recovering from a flood situation. So we had a flood relief initiative. So the efficiency of coming together and understanding our roles in terms of giving out food parcels to those who we expect are going to be hit a whole lot harder than those who are privileged and are able to, go to the supermarket. We even had issues of stockpiling at some point. So the privileged were really able to access food in bulk amounts to keep and store this pandemic. But we also had quite a big come around with a lot of initiatives coming into play to ensure that those who can't afford to purchase food in bulk are seen to. However, I also I did notice, as Arturo has mentioned, quite a lot of our delivery services that were prone or known mostly to deliver food products were also quite open to looking at other essential items, such as your electronic items or any other items that one didn't necessarily need to leave the house to actually go and purchase. However, coming back to Marc's point, I do think that there was a lot of uncertainty, especially with the measures that were put in place in regards to COVID, as we were very unsure whether or not we were able to even cross our borders when it comes to our supply. Something as simple as we had to reduce our supply radius, and we were limited only to our city, the city of Pietermaritzburg, because it was deemed safer to do so than to have employees and goods crossing borders based on the issue of spreading the COVID virus.
Wow, so interesting. Marc, sorry, I just want to go back to there. I cut you off. You had something to say about the global multinationals?
Yeah. So companies are stepping in, which is good, and individuals and NGOs are stepping in. That's obviously very good news, and it shows kind of the nature of mankind. But on the other hand, we shouldn't necessarily be relying on those. We should be able to organize this in a better way so that internationally you can set up distribution systems. And I do see that, when there is travel restrictions and all those type of things that you can, if you're a little bit more creative, you can set up a transport system without any risk of contamination. And that could have been done 2 or 3 months ago. It really is in Europe, across Europe, all the borders were closed except for food transport, which makes total sense.
Yeah, so I think it's an increasingly important issue. And, as the world is getting smaller, we are adding about 80 million more mouths to feed every year. And by 2050, that might be as much as 9.6 billion people. Arturo, how do we prepare for this and be sustainable?
Yeah, it's an incredibly daunting, thing to fathom. How we actually end up doing this in a way that doesn't destroy the planet, the planet that we inhabit. And what I come back to is that this pandemic is unfortunately a sign of, I think, where we're headed. That these will only become more common. That this is going to become our new normal. These pandemics, so many. If we don't act now, these things are going to continue happening. So many of the pandemics today are, and that we've had in the last 100 years, the vast majority of them come from animals, and from our consumption of them. And I think that there's going to be a need to completely reimagine our food system. And I think ultimately this really exposed the cracks in our food system, that it's one thing to produce a lot of food, but it's another thing to produce food safely. And that's where I think technologies like ours will be able to help, again, bridge that gap and be able to have distributed infrastructure where countries, to Marc's point, is that there was a lot of, we were trying to ship products from our manufacturing center to our customers, and there were some countries that were on lockdown, and it was very hard to get things out. And we cannot allow that to happen and have people go hungry. And so what I see as a very interesting opportunity is that with biotechnology, with some of these new technologies, is that each country can provide their core set of products, of foods. We, for example, can make our egg protein literally in anywhere in the world where there's access to some sugar and a fermenter and water. And I think that there's a huge opportunity for us to really take this learning experience right now as an opportunity to fundamentally change the way that we approach food production. Because right now it's just not sustainable. I mean, you look at the U.S., the meat processing facilities, they're Tyson, Smithfield, Purdue, the largest meat companies in the U.S. are having massive COVID outbreaks of all of these people because they have to be packed together to make this food. And we're putting people in harm's way. They are dying. And we're using this incredibly antiquated way of making our food that no longer needs to take place. We don't need that anymore. It's now just a matter. It's because it tastes good and nothing else.
I think that's so interesting. Do you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think Arturo made excellent points. Interestingly, the meat industry, same as in the US, we had our set of contaminations in the meatpacking industry as well. And in our case, I don't know about the US, but I suspect it's kind of the same. It was more related to how the workers actually are recruited and housed than the conditions in the slaughterhouses themselves. So these are mostly migrant workers that are housed under pretty abysmal conditions, in close confinement. They are bused by companies to the slaughterhouses, and that's where actually it's not in the slaughterhouses themselves, but in the housing and in the buses where the cross contamination occurs. So I think it's kind of in the whole scheme. It's a detail. In the whole scheme, we see that we have to feed 10 billion people with increasing needs for animal proteins because people get wealthier and get more sophisticated, if you like. And that is just not doable with the current inefficiencies in the system. There are a large number of inefficiencies in the current food system. The way we make animal proteins is one of them because the animals are just not very efficient. There's a lot of food waste. 40% of all that's grown is thrown away, never gets to the plate. And there is a distribution inefficiency, as we now see kind of enlarged by COVID, but has been around for a very long time. And as Andile says, we have been relying on food distribution in parts of South Africa for years. It's kind of a normal thing. And those distribution systems are becoming increasingly important because hunger is not really necessary. It's mostly a distribution problem. And if we take out the inefficiencies in the food production system, this planet has enough resources to feed 10 billion people.
So I love that point. I think there's two ideas that you're touching on here. The one is from David Roberts, where he speaks about this arse trade and the sparse trade, how the sparse trade got disrupted by the arse trade by cutting these big blocks of arse out in lakes. And then when they moved from cutting the blocks of arse out in lakes into a synthetic arse machine, people thought that the synthetic arse machine wasn't as good as the arse in the lakes. But it's really just a question of the process and how do we actually create the end product. And I think that's what you guys are really amazing at. And what you're doing is reinventing the actual process to getting to the end product, which is so exciting to solve this big problem. The other thing that you were talking about is that which has come through as a question, is how is this going to affect global supply chains? And do you think it's going to move more from a globalized supply chain to more of a local supply chain? Marc,
of course,
or anyone wants to take this?
Yeah. Sorry. Well, as Arturo mentioned, you can he can make his egg proteins everywhere in the world if you have access to a few items, and you don't need kind of the vast resources that you require to do this through animals. It's the same for us. You could do that. On the other hand, there's also kind of an economic question in the end. Because you can democratize this, but if you want to have your 100 grams of Clara Food albumin 5 cents cheaper or 2 cents cheaper, then or a half a cent cheaper, then you need to scale up. And then you get to where we are in the traditional situation where large multinational companies have scaled up production and centralized production just to make things a couple of cents cheaper. And so that's kind of the economic law that is almost independent of the technologies that we are developing. Sure, the technologies by themselves lead them to or have the ability to become democratized and start doing small scale production. And I certainly hope that that will be the case. But there's no guarantee, I think, because as long as consumers are still willing to save like a couple of cents on a product, scaling up to large industries is kind of an economic law.
Yeah,
thanks so much for that.
I think to add to that, and Marc, to your earlier point about how we've seen, I think we can use this pandemic as a case study for how the world will respond, which is that instead of looking outward, the world looked inward, right? Countries and governments looked and locked everything up to contain it, and in many ways, supply chains were massively affected. And so I think just looking at this pandemic as an example, I think there's going to be more focus from governments of saying, all right, which countries are we too dependent on for key resources? And how do we find ways to resource those internally in case something like this happens again, where we need to contain something and close our borders? And I think that there's going to be more governments looking at opportunities to see, all right, are we depending too much on certain countries for these products that we could potentially make in here? And have it homegrown. And so I think that there's going to be more of a push, given that I think, again, COVID has really exposed a lot of the cracks in our current food system of finding ways to see how we can produce more things at home. Whether or not, and to Marc's point, it's not as efficient as having the scale and having a particular place to have massive production, but it seems like for a lot of these governments, a few cents more for their products may be worth it, to have that sense of comfort to know, all right, if this country locks down or and shuts down exports, how can we still feed our people here?
Interestingly enough,
Andile?
we experienced quite a lot of this in our country, where the large majority of the consumer is currently consuming a lot of the products that are dumped due to excess supply from various countries. So we have been in a space where we've been taking on off for quite a while. We've seen quite a lot of farms getting becoming liquidated due to the fact that the product is no longer efficient or economical to produce within the country. A lot of that obviously has been caused by the very stringent biosecurity attached to the production of animal products, of course, which is quite unaffordable if you're not within scale. And a lot of the consumers then shy away from our local products due to how expensive they are to buy, and we end up buying a lot of the dump products. I also believe, though, that there is quite a lot of education that needs to come with understanding the process of obviously producing food. because I have learned quite an interesting amount of innovative and more technological ways of producing meat products due to having read quite a lot of the work that Marc and Arturo have been doing. And that's not a very common or conventional way of getting food within our country. So a lot of education still needs to come with understanding the possibilities that are out there in terms of how we could potentially produce protein products.
Andile, I've got a follow-up question for you from Amos. Amos is asking you, how do you assist new entrants into farming? I just acquired 1 hectare of land to do veg farming. How do I start? What technology should I consider?
Yeah, from a space perspective, I've always said that if you're going to go the conventional open field way of producing cash crops, which is obviously probably the most affordable form of farming in our country, you would have to at least have 10 hectares of land in order to be able to sort of rotate your production and not sort of in a sustainable way. Basically, you want to do so in such a way that's not going to waste water or destroy your soils. So I've often said 10 hectares, but obviously understanding the dynamic of land issue in our country, a lot of people are wanting to become more sustainable and more food secure, obviously by producing their own food. So, I mean, on 1 hectare of land, it only makes sense to go extremely technologically advanced as you possibly can, because you still want to get quite a high number of units coming out of that very small piece of land. So obviously exploring options like vertical farming, vertical hydroponics, where you are using various levels of space within that 1 hectare plot, but to try and produce quite a lot of vegetables or crops is probably the way to go. So a lot of research will have to go into vertical farming.
Thanks so much for that. We've got a great question from Tiffany Voro, who's tuning in from San Francisco. And Tiffany's asking, if synthetic and cellular agriculture takes off, what do you think will be the role of today's farmers in tomorrow's markets?
That's a great question from Tiffany. Farmers are, in my mind, maybe Andile should answer this because he is a farmer, but in my mind, they are the ultimate entrepreneurs. They basically extract value from the land that they have. And if you are, and they need to produce food. And we need them to produce food, and we need them to continue to them doing that. So what we are seeing, I think, in certain areas, definitely here in the Netherlands, that a lot of farmers just stop farming animals because there's no money in it, or there's too much political kind of controversy around it. So they stop farming animals for different reasons. And they move to other crops that eventually can be used as feedstock, for instance, to make cultured meat. So we are discussing this with a couple of farmers. This is a very local and regional initiative to transform the industry and to also get the feed industry, the animal feed industry, which is a big kind of partner in this as well, to get them online so that we can start producing crops that can be used to feed cells instead of cows or pigs. And farmers are into that. They, at least the forward-thinking farmers, not everybody, but the forward-thinking farmers. And the ones who are really good entrepreneurs will adapt, and they will use their land for value creation, for crops that can eventually feed into the fermenters that Arturo is using or the fermenters that we are using.
Arturo, do you want to add to that?
I think what Marc has said is I think very astute. I don't have much to add there.
Brilliant.
Except for the fact that Yeah, I mean, ultimately, at least in the, especially in developed countries, farmers are such a small percentage of our population now. And I think to Marc's point, they're very entrepreneurial. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities there for people like them, and especially, I mean, it's not just synthetic and southern agriculture, but there's plant-based proteins. You just announced, you spoke earlier today, Mick, about the Live Kindly company, and there are so many companies that are focusing on growing, using plant matter and plant proteins to develop really great products. And so I think that the future of food will be a mix of different technologies, including plants, where I think that there's obviously a lot more synergy and overlap with today's farmers.
And Arturo, I think a big hurdle in gaining adoption of all these new technologies will be getting the public to come on board, and as well as governments being open to trying a different way. Already we are seeing that many people don't actually believe the type of products. We've had a few comments that people don't believe of the type of products that you guys are creating. So how do we get the public to understand that there are different ways of making food in an open and honest way? And how do we get the governments to start changing policies to allow these new types of foods into new markets?
Mm-hmm. But when you say believe, do you mean like people don't believe they exist, or they don't believe in the products as a path forward?
So just as an example, some of the comments we received in Facebook were, what do you mean making eggs without chickens? They don't actually believe it's true. It's some type of magic.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, so it's a great question. I'm glad I asked to clarify, because the technology we're using, as crazy as it sounds, has been around for 40 years. Making animal proteins without using animals has been around since the 80s. The first ever protein made without using an animal was insulin. Before the 1980s, companies had to kill pigs and then extract the insulin protein from their pancreas, purify that, and then inject it into people. And every single diabetic who was taking insulin was getting it from pigs. And you needed over 50,000 pigs to make 1 kilo of insulin. And Genentech, this biotech company, found a way to use fermentation and use a microorganism by encoding the same gene that codes for that protein into the microbe, and then in a fermenter was able to recreate the insulin protein. And fast forward to today, over 98% of insulin in the world is made using fermentation instead of animals. And so we take that same technology and apply that to food, because we know it's life-saving, we know that it's safe, and we know that it's scalable, and ultimately can ensure the same functionality of the animal proteins that it was meant to replace. And so that's really where the technology that we're using is very much very, very real. And there's now a lot of cheese production is made using this exact same technology as well, to make the rennet protein that used to come from from calf stomachs. Now it's 90% of it is made using fermentation. And so we've seen this adoption, obviously, in applications that people don't really know about, and so therefore it seems very distant. But it's ubiquitous, and we're just taking it a step further by saying, look, it's been around for decades, it's been scaled. How do we make this accessible to solve a problem that is critical, which is how do we scale this up in a way that fundamentally makes it different in terms of our water, land, and energy usage as a world?
No, thanks for that answer.
Yeah,
Marc,
I think
do you want to build on that?
I think you also have to. Sorry, yeah, I think you also have to kind of analyze where this disbelief, or maybe even stronger reservation, is coming from. We are biologically programmed not to eat new things things that we don't know. And of course, these are new products. They are made in a different way. They are essentially the same products, but they are made in a different way. So they are seen as new. And people have to develop trust in those. And well, first of all, you have to have products. So I'm glad that Arturo is launching his products very soon now, so that people can actually see for themselves. This is a real product that I like and that I can eat and that is safe, that has passed regulations, that has passed all kind of the national or international tests, and I can eat it. And once people develop that trust, which will take time, they will start adopting new stuff. Because on the other hand, we are perfectly capable of eating all sorts of foods currently that we don't quite understand or that we don't quite know its composition of. So once you develop that trust, you can get a long way. But that trust has to be developed, and that just takes time. We see on the government side that, to my delight, I must say, a lot of governments actually actively looking into these technologies and starting to promote them, either financially support them or have at least discussions on how can we regulate this, how can we ease the way into marketing. So from the governmental side, we are, and not everywhere, but in a lot of places, we are seeing good efforts to help.
Thank you. So we're getting a whole bunch of questions from the audience around what sort of studies should kids do to get into these types of fields? What can you learn when you're growing up, when you're in school? How can you follow this? And Ruth Granham is asking, Arturo, how do we bring this technology to Africa?
Yeah, great questions. I mean, firstly, to answer your first question on studies, anything STEM related is huge. We, especially in San Francisco, there's a shortage of chemical engineers, of molecular biologists, of scientists and engineers who work with biological systems. And so, but ultimately, anything computer data related, software related, in so many ways, biology is being completely transformed as well by data and software in a way that I think that particular those particular disciplines are going to continue growing massively. And so I would say anything science related and math related are going to be critical for these professions. And I think number two is on your question in terms of how we can bring this to South Africa. Ultimately, I was there last year for the South Africa summit and for the Singularity University Summit. And what I've been really excited about is how excited people are about the new food space. And I think the most critical pieces for companies like us is to have the right partners, whether, as Marc mentioned, from a government point of view, ultimately we can scale it up anywhere. Right now we're prioritizing basically which countries do we expand to first. And our way of identifying those markets and those opportunities are by one question, which is, do we have the right partner there? I think if there's a legitimate interest from government or from established incumbents, like companies, for example, like RCL Foods and others who already have a presence in those markets, it's much easier for companies like us to enter those markets because we have partners that understand those much better than we can. And so that's where I see the biggest opportunity.
Awesome, no thanks. And a question for Andile here from Mafundu. If we move to vertical farming, hydroponics, new ways of farming, is there any role bees can play for pollination services?
Mm.
Sure. Well, we've faced quite a big challenge with our our new ways of producing our crops in our country, because a lot of the uh, seed that we have been using and a lot of the plants that we've been producing have obviously become more hybrid, which means we don't really depend on bees pollinating any of our crops in order for them to give us yields. So we've had from the research that has been going around, we have been seeing a decline in the number of bee colonies within our country, really, due to these issues. When it comes to hydroponics and vertical farming, I think obviously there are certain designs that could potentially be established, obviously, to sort of integrate the technological and more scientific ways of producing food with that of nature. But I'm unsure, simply because a lot of the crops that do require a lot of intervention with nature and bees as such are usually things like more the food crops, basically. So you get things like butternut, peppers, tomatoes, plants that flower and produce fruit, of a fruit type of crop. And it's very difficult to grow those kind of crops in a vertical setup, simply because they're too heavy, or they grow too big, or the root system is just not designed. It's a whole lot deeper. So we obviously are mindful of the fact that we can't go all the way vertical farming for most crops just yet. But for those leafy crops, obviously like cabbage, spinach, Swiss chard, uh, those are perfect for vertical farming, and obviously don't need much nature intervention.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Marc, here's one for you. Do you know any companies in South Africa or Africa that are producing cell-based meat?
No, I don't. I don't think there is any at this
Donovan
point.
Wool.
Um,
How does one start such a thing?
quite a few have started. Easiest is to start, based somewhere in a university where you have all the equipment, all the labs to basically use the medical technology to make this happen. That would be the easiest. What we're also seeing is that there are a couple of companies now arising that kind of provide support for either software, hardware, growth factors, culture medium components, where people step in and see where they can make a change and can make cheaper supplies or more efficient supplies for this technology. So there's a wide variety of companies now coming up to support the eventual cultured or cultivated meat companies. But if you want to start with cultivated meat itself, probably easiest is to start from a university type of lab.
Thank you so much. Guys, we have run out of time. We've got so many questions going on, and we just want to ask each of you if you can leave us with a closing statement around the food of the future being secure. What advice can you give for the public? Let's start with you, Arturo.
First of all, thank you very much for having us, for having me, Mick. Really appreciate sharing some of our perspectives and what we're seeing happen on our side and from our perspective. But I'd love to definitely hear more from others. We're online, LinkedIn, Facebook. Feel free to reach out to us. info@clarafoods.com. But I think for me specifically, in terms of what's most exciting, is that I think Africa in general, but South Africa specifically, there's so much potential to be an early adopter and a champion of these technologies. And I think for so many countries, where this will really, I think, determine who's a leader in the space and who gets left behind. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for for there to be active collaborations between our companies and those on the continent. And I think South Africa is a perfect market for this, for some of these technologies. As we've seen, there's already been a lot of really interesting adoptions of new food technologies like the Beyond Burger and others. And I think that that's only going to increase. So I'm very optimistic for the future, especially as consumers driving a lot of these trends towards better foods.
No, awesome. Just one last question that was asked from Shane Mann. Does your eggs have cholesterol?
Zero cholesterol. So we only produce the proteins, not anything else. And so, yes, our eggs are 100% cholesterol free.
Thanks for that. Andile, do you want to leave us with some closing remarks?
I think that a lot of the young people should use the opportunity available through our education, our education of the faculties that we study in food technology and food in general, and use the opportunity to break the generational mindset of trying to solve local issues. I think that if we started to employ more of a global view in terms of innovation, we could actually use the resources we have and have a young crop of very well-versed young people who understand food technology better coming through and changing the conventional thought of food production.
Thanks so much. Marc, over to you.
I would encourage everybody to remain open-minded, which is difficult when it comes to food because we have such a emotional relationship with it and with the way it's being produced. But be open-minded. There are many, many different ways of producing food. And there are many, many different ways of producing different ways of producing the same food that we already know. And just be open-minded and think about all the potential ways where you can grow either sugars, amino acids, proteins, or fats, or use them from different sources. We have seen insects, we have seen a lot of vegetable sources coming up lately. They're all very good sources of food for us, and be open-minded and look at all of them, and also be critical of the inefficiencies in our current food system.
Before I say thanks to the panel, I just want
to...
Sorry, Arturo?
Can I add one more point?
Yeah, sure, of course.
I think to Marc's point about being open-minded, I'd love to take that a step further and encourage people to get excited about this. Like these foods are delicious, but also mean so much to the planet and to our health. They're free of antibiotics, of hormones, and I think to the extent that people can get educated about this, to be advocates for these technologies. Ultimately, the reasons why these companies exist is because, and why we can get funded to scale production is because there's demand for these products. And that comes from the consumer. And so each of you as individuals, each of us can play a role in helping advocate and have dinner conversations around these technologies. There's a podcast called the Business for Good podcast, or there's a few books available as well, also a ton online. And so I'd encourage everyone to get really excited about this because the future looks very bright, and there are very real solutions to fundamentally making the world a better place.
Love that. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I totally agree with you. It's really about education and awareness. And the more we can become aware of what is available through technology, the more we can use it for our benefit. So before I say thanks to our panel, I just want to let you all know not to go anywhere. We have the Share the Tech Love segment coming up. We will be giving away some awesome prizes. And then we have a great performance from the Black Cat Bones. Thanks so much to our panel. It's been a really, really amazing time and a pleasure having you all here today. Thanks for sharing some of your exciting food projects globally. We can't wait to taste the cultured meat and the eggs. And when lockdown ends, we look forward to visiting your farm, Andile. We are so grateful. Thank you all. Thank you so much. We're going to move into our Share the Tech Love section. Share the Tech Love is our way of giving back. Each way, all the registered guests will go into a random draw, and various lucky winners will be eligible to win a prize. And the prizes vary each week from physical to digital goods. Tonight we have some really, really cool giveaways that we're going to give away. And tonight we're giving away 2 Fries food vouchers. That's a proudly SA plant-based brand that just joined the Live Kindly Co. The vouchers are at the value of R1,000 each and can be redeemed at any Fries products, any of the Fries products from a Checkers near you. So let's draw our 2 winners. And Tamsin, please roll the dice. Our 2 winners are Brayton Benjamin and Muzi Shabalala from Adapt RT. Well done, Muzi. You've just won yourself R1,000 each Fries vouchers. For our next prize, we'll give away Siakana vegetable gardening courses valued at R15,000 each. We're going to give away 5 of these courses totaling R60,000 in value. Thanks so much to Siakana, and it's amazing what you guys are doing in the communities and around South Africa to help build sustainable food solutions. So after you take this course, you'll be able to make your own vegetable garden. Let's draw our 5 winners. Tamsin. And we have Andrew Ludwig, Sareshni Govender, Stacey Brewer, Tulane Tokwe, and Gary Siegel. Well done to you guys. You will all get, we'll be in contact with you this week to get your prizes. Okay, so that's it for tonight's show. Thank you so much for joining us. If you had a good time, make sure to subscribe to our channel. You just go onto YouTube and you hit the subscribe button, or you can register on the website to get all the information each week and ensure that you are in the draw to win in the Share the Tech Love giveaways. We hope that you learned something from the show, took away some insights and knowledge about the future of food. It's a really exciting space, as Arturo said. Let's stick together, collaborate, come up with new solutions that we could never imagine. Next week, we'll be looking at robots to the rescue and be discussing how robots are actually our friends and can help us deal with the post-COVID world and thrive in the future. We have an incredible inventor and entrepreneur from Nigeria, Silas Adekunle, a Nigerian inventor, technology entrepreneur, who is known for creating the world's first intelligent gaming robot, as well as Peter Zing, a faculty member of the Singularity U Australia team. He is the co-founder of Transhumanism Australia, a community of technologists dedicated to helping society transcend the limitations of our human biology, and our very own SUSE faculty member and head professor at Wits University for AI and machine learning, Benji Rosmarin, whose focus on machine learning, artificial intelligence, robotics, and automation is one of the most cutting edge I've ever seen. You can join any of our social media pages, as well as like and subscribe as our YouTube channel, as I said before. Please help educate students from Maharishi Institute by donating. All you have to do is scan the QR code on the screen, and all the proceeds go to buying data and devices for students learning remotely. Let's make sure we can help these kids keep learning. As we said, we are showcasing some amazing South African talent at the end of each show in order to give them a bit of a chance to express some of their music and their beautiful entertainment. Tonight we have the Black Cat Bones, which is a South African rock band formed in Pretoria in 2007. The group consists of members Kobus and Andre, with Casey Rothman and Gareth on drums, and is considered to be one of the current top performing acts in South Africa. Please make sure to get in touch with these guys, the Black Cat Bones. It's been a pleasure hosting you guys. I'm McMahon. Let's future-proof Africa together. Stay safe and keep smiling. Over to you, the Black Cat Bones.
Thank you very much. Good evening, we're the Black Cat Bones. I'll perform you some acoustic tunes. are gathered here today to make hunt on a fox who's run away, a disciple led astray. How did it become this way? Dearly beloved, it is very hard to say. In the light of all the things I've seen today on the continent, the ins and outs of life, just before you go, you feel that something's wrong. I think I might have lost this one. Oh my Lord, what have I done? Just before you go, you feel that something's wrong. I think I might have lost this one. Oh my Lord, what have I done? Dearly beloved, wide-eyed volunteers, awkward ancestors, harbored mutineers, you have a long way to go. And there's the evil that men do. Dearly beloved, those caught in the vine, the birthmarks are fading slowly over time. Like children, we've completely lost our way. Just before you go, you feel that something's wrong. I think I might have lost this one. Oh my Lord, what have I done? Just before you go, you feel that something's wrong. I think I might have lost this one. Oh my Lord, what have I done? Just before you go, you feel that something's wrong. I think I might have lost this one. Oh my Lord, what have I done? Just before you go, you feel that something's wrong. I think I might have lost this one. Oh my Lord, what have I done? Thank you very much, Songle, dearly beloved.